Are you sitting comfortably? Then let us begin. Let us continue our studies with today's teaching, an immersion in the first mastery in the sovereign way, which is remembering. This is a lifelong skill that brings us back to poise in the most turbulent and difficult times. It recalibrates our compass and it reminds us of who we really are. It's a skill that turns on the light and illuminates the darkness that we're sitting in. And it may illuminate the darkness that someone else is sitting in by the nature of your radiance. So this is the perfect mastery for you to practice if you're someone who sinks below the surface from time to time, like we are all wont to do. And if you struggle to get back up again, that's the part that's avoidable. So this is the mastery that helps us prevent the sensation, the ongoing sensation of overwhelm, like I've fallen and I can't get up. This is the mastery that turns on the light and brings us back to the surface. So just to give you the framework and the context here, the sovereign way is a structure of thought. It's an ontological arrangement of life teachings and masteries that help us to interpret our moments and brings meaning and intimacy, power and grace to the experience that we're living in the here and now. It helps us to reveal the links between consciousness, energy, and form. It unravels impossible tangles. It refreshes and revitalizes what's stagnant, and it builds your spiritual muscle for the quest, the never-ending quest of life. There are 8 masteries. There are 8 masteries in the sovereign way. And if you like, you can download an outline of what these are and what the outcomes or the results of having these masteries embodied are. Embodied just means that the skill is in your muscle memory. It's not archived away in the dark libraries of spiritual intellect. It's a part of how you know life. And these lifelong spiritual skills uphold a sort of position in mindset where you're both living inside constant ongoing deliverance, being liberated moment by moment from the worldly ties that bind, and also mastering the path of conscious enlightenment. So this is what we say is ascension in Christ, and that's at the core of what we stand for. Now, training in these 8 masteries sequentially, like in a logical order, brings you an ontological strength in your mindset and in your vibration. By the way, ontology is the school of philosophy that deals with becoming. It deals with the science of life and the science of becoming in life. And so building your ontological strength in mindset and vibration is ascension. And our teachings are always following this path. So it's a logical and magical experience. And you can also train with us privately in a personal development program. So if you're on the live stream on Facebook, or you're on the live stream on YouTube and you'd like that outline of those 8 masteries, then drop a comment right now, drop a comment, and then we'll reach out to you with that outline so you can see for yourself, you can sink into these masteries yourself. But today's teaching in the sovereign way is an immersion in the first mastery, remembering. Remembering what I really am. It is the singular most important life skill. It's fundamental. It's foundational. You see, all things in your experience of growth and enlightenment build on this knowing of who you are. And so that is your foundation, it's your rock, and it never goes away. It's your essence. It's your unique expression of love. Remembering what you really are. And remembering what you really are is remembering yourself back into what you really are. Do you see that? So remembering isn't just a recall, it's remembering, as in placing yourself as a member back into the body of Christ. Life is complex, life is comprehensive, and hardship is a part of the game. So whether your suffering manifests in your life circumstances, like your relationship or your finances, or perhaps your suffering manifests in your body, like disease and sickness, or maybe in your vibration, like in your emotions or energetic disturbances, or like you just can't shift your point of attraction, or perhaps it manifests in your mental health, in anxiety, depression, maybe in your identity, like schizophrenia, narcissism, or victimhood. Hardship is a part of life. And you don't get to measure whose hardship is harder than whose, because it's a sacred part of the game and everybody owns it. But it's always temporary and fleeting if we have the mastery of remembering. Remembering is the awakening of the knowledge, of the knowing that I am one with God, that I am source and spirit and substance, that I am the Trinity incarnate, and so is everything else. It is the stirring of deep knowing that I am more than the stories. I'm more than this illness. I'm more than the traumas, the fears, the thing that my mother said to me. I'm more than the problems in my relationship. I'm more than this impossible tangle in life. I'm more than the trappings of the world. And it's also not just the stirring of it, but it's that lifelong skill that you need to embody if you want to be delivered from the trudgery of human suffering. I've got to be honest with you, one of the gravest errors that I made after my awakening, after my sudden realization that spirit is very much alive, back 10 years ago, one of the gravest errors I made was to go, I figured it out. I know now. I know who I am. And in making that declaration of spiritual ego, I crystallized my idea of God as me. And I held that crystallization for years. And it took a grueling life boot camp to release the structure that I had formed and remember. You see, in the structure, even a seemingly good one, in structure, you are susceptible to illusion, to manipulation, seduction, pride, falsehood, and suffering. The moment you make agreement as an identity with an outer circumstance, now you are vulnerable to the world. But when you remember truth, you are set free. John 14:20, on that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. That's the truth. So let me tell you about what it looks like to have that mastery of remembering embodied in you. When this is in your way of knowing yourself, these are some of the results. Number one, you will understand the sovereign model of human consciousness. And that gives you a lifelong method to map the landscape before you. You'll always be able, in the middle of an impossible tangle, you'll be able to look at that tangle from the perspective of the sovereign model of human consciousness, and you'll be able to say, aha, here are the links between form, energy, and consciousness. And that'll help you unravel everything that is before you. It'll give you an incredible wisdom. Number two, you'll have a framework for testing truth in your body, in your energy, and in your mind. And you'll be using it. Remembering only works if you actually honor the remembering. And number three, you'll always have a way to locate that eternal love, to know where it dwells inside of you and how to find it when you feel lost. You'll be able to see the spark in the darkness and follow it. I'll share that one commonality that every student on the Sovereign Way has shared about how they've transformed. Because you see, the Sovereign Way is unique to everyone who travels it. But one thing that everyone experiences is that now they have space. between the hardship that is occurring and who they are. And that space allows poise. Poise allows a recalibration of thought and feeling, of words, of action. And it allows clarity for the path ahead. You can't do anything else on this planet as an enlightened master if you haven't mastered the art of remembering that that's what you are. Right? You will not have an enlightened, liberated life if you can't remember that that's who you are. So remembering is both recollection, right? Oh yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, I remember now. That's recollection, right? Recalling. Because none of this is new information. Every single person on this planet has this knowing embodied in them already. It's written on your heart. It's encoded in your DNA. I know I am that I am. And so an element of remembering is that intellectual recall. Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. And another part of it is the remembering your knowing of yourself into that flow of infinite creativity, the essence of all that is endless, and the omnipresence of a vital life force that can restore all things back to divine perfection. So I recall it, and now I bring myself back into it. I am a member of it. I am remembered. I am a member of the body of Christ. In your mind now, go to that hollow groan of loneliness that we feel in the darkest of times. Think back to that. Remember that darkness. It's safe, I promise. Go there in your mind and go there in your vibration and remember the ache. Maybe this is a place where you're living right now. Maybe this is a part of your life right now. Maybe you're in the dark, dark mud. And in that space, whether you're there in your remembering or you're there in the present, notice that even in the shadows, in the tar pit, in the void, you are aware of the spark. You are aware of the spark. It never goes away. I promise that. It can't. It's what you're made of. It's the indwelling waymaker. It's the promise keeper. It's the light in the darkness. And the fact that that spark is there in the darkest depths of the tar pit, regardless of what the world is telling you, that spark is there, means that you are always connecting spirit to the world through you. That you are the remembering. And the spark has a name. Call it Emmanuel. That means God with us. That's who Jesus is. God as human. The indwelling spark. The fact that you can never not be source and spirit and substance. You can never not be in loving command of the life that you are, the experience that you have. Let's look at how it shows on the model of human consciousness. So we say that all things, if you watch the previous teaching called What is Trinity, all things are a unified Trinity, indivisible, recapitulated as one. God is knowing, God is loving, and God is all existence. And then we have essence. We have essence, we have spirit, we have word, breath. And this is that power in motion, infinitely creative. Here's a lovely bit from the Bible. This is by the way, the Bible is a great framework for knowing ourselves, and it doesn't exclude human suffering. That's why I love it so much. There's a lot of darkness in there, which means it can speak to the totality of what it's like to be a person. And this is a lovely bit from the Bible. This is John 1:1-5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehends it not. It's a mystery what this essence is. It's still, it's calm, it's home. It's infinitely restorative. But now let's look at the other half of the human model of human consciousness. Because you see, the refraction in the human consciousness that we get when we prescribe to certain ideas or values, good or bad, does not exclude God. It does not separate us from God. Even if we're making all these crazy judgments about what is possible for us and who we need to be and how we need to show up in the world, God is still wholly present. The refraction simply gives it meaning and substance. It creates this particularized and unique diversity of experience. So when you know this, when you fully understand that your particularized experience cannot exclude God, now you are remembered to the ability to see God in everything. Nothing that was made without him. God is honestly in all things. And when you remember that, you can see it. That now you have alchemy, because now you have the poise of recalibration. Because you can see God in everything. You can see God in the other. And you can see God in yourself. And then, I am word. I am word. I am knowing. I am Christ. So this point right here, that point right there, that's the spark. That's the infinite presence of God right there. And notice how it's above all of your judgments. It's above all of your beliefs, all of your limiting ideas, all of your criticism, all the things that Stacy told you in third grade, all the problems you have with your mother. The spark is there anyway, and it's above those things or beyond those things. And then when you witness that spark, when you seek that spark, you are reawakened in the image of God, an ultimate creator in presence. And you can transform any situation because you are imbued with the knowing of the infinite creative life force. You're no longer a victim to the trappings of the world, but you can see as long as you're inside the trappings of the world, you have zero control. Absolutely no control. But when you remember the truth of who you really are, now you have command. You can forgive. You can create. You can harvest. You can heal. You can enjoy. And you can be free to receive beyond the boundaries of what you thought were possible. And this is where you start from, right? Start with remembering. Don't go out there into the world trying to solve any problems. If you're some diminished version of yourself that's been defined by other people, you have no power at all, no control at all. It will do no good. Start with remembering. This is where you start from. All else is meaningless without remembering. But to remember is only the start. Let me be honest. We won't do it perfectly. We won't always get it right. We won't always flawlessly act exactly according to the highest and best for all involved. But I can tell you that the surest way to keep from remembering is to adopt the stance of pride or staunch rebellion against the inner knowing. To put yourself in opposition to your heart's song, to invest in what you've built so far, what's already created, to put all of your worth on what you've told the world about who you are. Saying, I do remember who I am, but if I honor that, it means giving up the victimhood that keeps me fed by other people's pity. Or it means giving up my place on the pedestal in the marketplace or in my company, revered by others. Or it means giving up my story that my mother didn't treat me right, and that makes me suddenly now accountable for my healing. So I have to ask you a very tough question. Do you intend to honor who you really are? Do you intend to obey God? If you do develop the mastery of remembering truth, will you actually honor it? Or have you already decided to follow your own way despite what the Holy Spirit can bring you from the infinite wellspring because you're an independent badass? You're going to choose your position in the world above the possibility of renewal. Be honest, because God already knows. God knows your heart. Do you? Do you intend to honor truth by following through in your actions? And there are many frequencies that will interfere. It's not all about you. Internally in you, there are things like pride and lust and laziness and gluttony and peer pressure, addictions, personal ambitions, impatience with God's timing. What are the interferences in your life? Take a moment. What are those frequencies that are interfering with your willingness to honor the truth? For me, pride, poor boundaries, peer pressure, people pleasing, impatience. And I'm vulnerable to addiction too. So I need to recalibrate every single day to keep myself back into remembering. It doesn't take me long. Snap of my fingers. I may feel a pang of judgment, or I may feel a rise of anger, or I may feel the formulation of guilt, or I may feel myself shrink back, but snap with my fingers because this mastery is embodied in me. And lickety split, I remember. I know who I am. I am sovereign. So what are those interferences that pose a risk to your willingness to honor the truth? Remembering is just the beginning. You have to follow through. So for now, your energetic decision is enough. So let me ask you again, and this time I want your energetic decision. I want you to know the answer. Do you intend to remember and honor that remembering in the darkest hours? If you like, you can make agreement by writing yes in the chat. Whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or here in the Zoom room, if you agree, Right, yes. Good. Very good. Very good. Amen. This is John 5:30. I can do nothing on my own. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just because I do not seek my own will, but the will of my Father. When Jesus said this, he wasn't ignoring the fact that he had a human will of his own, but he was committed to honoring truth above that. You know, he was committed. He didn't get what he wanted. He sat there in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, take this from me. I don't want this. I don't want to be tortured and crucified. But he was steeped in humility and he was available to follow the flow. And he saved the entire human race. So you and I have our own will too. That's fine. I didn't want to be made homeless. I'm very glad it happened. We don't need to pretend that we don't have a will. But most of us fear the loss of our hopes and our dreams and our ambitions if we should ever submit ourselves entirely to truth. We imagine that all our dreams and all our goodness will be crushed and discarded, never fulfilled. But honoring truth may require us to adjust a little bit. Remembering may require us to adjust, but it'll never leave us lacking. If you have to give up your idea of as a victim, or you've got to give up your idea that you're the king of the universe and you can do anything, if you have to give up these things, it will not lead us lacking. Our will is not extinguished, it's surrendered. It becomes like the clay to a potter's hand, pliant and malleable, the raw material for his most stunning masterpieces. Because that's what you are. You're his masterpiece. We don't lose when we surrender to that. We win. This is Psalm 32:8. I will instruct you and teach you in the way which you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. This is a promise. If you decide to surrender to the flow of loving truth, then you will be guided. You will be guided right into expansion, into the blossoming of your life. And guess what? You'll make mistakes and you'll meet resistance because that's also growth. This is Psalm 26:2. Examine me, O Lord, and try me. Test my mind and my heart. This is a part of our covenant with life, that we will be examined and tested and tried, not because we need to prove to God that we're worthy, but because we need to be shown ourselves that we are worthy. We need to practice the masteries of life. And so sometimes when we feel that things are falling apart and we feel like we've dived into the darkest tar pit, we can feel so unworthy, like this must be happening because I've done something wrong. What is this disease now all of a sudden? How have I failed so gruesomely in life as to be dealing with this hardship right now? But if you have that remembering, if you're able to look at what is and remember that spark of knowing, and once again remember yourself to the knowing that I am that I am, then you can recreate that circumstance, any circumstance, in sacredness. You can sanctify it. You can turn agony into majesty. Let's finish with a thought experiment. This is a sort of a subtle vibrational leaning into a new awakening, one that transcends through the stories, past the echoes of grief for what could have been, and into the promise of enlivening, awakening, and complete belonging. This is an experience which elevates our identity out of the tangles of the world. And it's a thought experiment that was designed 1,000 years ago by a marvelous mind, a man called Ibshna, which is spelled Avicenna. And he was a brilliant Muslim philosopher, probably the most influential philosopher of the medieval period. He was an innovative thinker, he was a provocative thinker, and he influenced some of the greatest philosophers in all three Abrahamic camps. The Abrahamic camps are a Jewish thought, Christian thought, and Muslim thought. He influenced people like Al-Ghazali and Thomas Aquinas. So you can see that his thought experiment, his proposal that I am despite what is, or within what is, was one of the most influential and provocative ideas of the time, because that was sort of during relatively separatist thinking, relatively dualist thinking, dark times, the Dark Ages, actually. But in this thought experiment, so he designed this thought experiment during that time. And in this thought experiment, what he's asking us to do is imagine a human being with absolutely no sensory experience whatsoever. So that this subject cannot hear, cannot see, cannot taste, cannot have any experiences of anything at all. And he said, certainly God, right? God can do anything. So certainly God can create a fully functioning and developed cognizer who cannot have a visceral experience, a visceral sensory experience of seeing or hearing or touching or tasting or smelling. It's called the floating man. Now, today, it's not a stretch at all to imagine such a situation. We can, oh yeah, I can imagine that. And I love that Avicenna or Ibshna came up with this thought experiment, not knowing that 1,000 years later, we would have sensory deprivation tanks, these like floating tanks that you can go in to experience this very intimate communion with the soul. Have you ever tried a sensory deprivation experience? Have you ever tried it? Put it in the chat if you have, or even if you haven't, and share your thoughts, share some of your experiences if you've ever been in one of these tanks. If you've ever been the floating man of Ibshna's thought experiment 1,000 years ago. I want to know if you have. Yes, we have a few. So in this intimate, we have someone saying, I got some sessions and haven't gone yet. Go, yeah, do it. Do it, and do it with remembering this thought experiment. And while you're in the tank, remember the floating man, because we're going to do it now. So Ibshna suggests that this person with no experience at all, with no sound, cannot see, cannot feel, cannot have any experience, he would know one thing, and that is that he himself exists. He would be aware of himself, not needing experiences of other things which stand in some relation to him. He would not need the tangle of manifest items and actualized experiences to be able to cognize and know, I am that I am. He would know that self exists without anything needed to define it. He would know that self is sovereign. Now, the purpose of this experiment is to practice elevating our awareness so that we can more easily detach our identity from the thoughts that we think, from the emotions that rage through our body. Practicing returning to poise, a poised mindset where we are sovereign over mind. We're sovereign over our energy field, over our emotions, sovereign over our words that we use and the actions and the way that we relate to others. And then we can carry this mastery into our relationships, into our experiences and our consciousness. We can be in the world, but not of it. Look, there's nothing wrong with the world. The world does not exclude God. When people say, God isn't out there, God isn't here. But that's not the whole truth. God isn't here and out there. But your ability to remember the Trinity, to remember the wholeness of source and substance and spirit, that's your ability to infuse your knowing of the world, to see God in all things, so that you can be in the world and know it as divine, but not be of the world, not be told by the world what you are, or what you need to eat, or what your diseases are, or what your diagnosis is. But we can use these things as a map and compass to help us navigate things that are actualized, but let us always remember where the true creative life force comes from. So let's do the floating man together. Be comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, become comfortable. Shift your body. Shift your vibration. Shift your mind. And be free to be a floating man. Take deep breaths in and out. Notice the inspire and the expire, and the gloriously automatic nature of your breathing. Notice the pressure and the texture of the fabric against your body. Notice the weight of your body. Get into the senses now before we leave them. And keep breathing, and with every exhale, so go in, and with every exhale, notice that you are lightening a little. Loftily poised. And a little more. And a little more. Lightening until you are floating. Until no part of your body is touching any surface. Just imagine it in your mind. A floating man. Have you diminished in worth? Has your value been reduced? Now notice that your feet are dissolving. Because you know, my darling, they're not really there anyway. They're just atoms dancing together in the cosmic fabric, no more manifest than the whisper of a dream. And your legs are dissolving, as if the atoms that were once dancing together in the cosmic fabric cease holding hands and drift from one another, returning back into the infinite. inch by inch up your legs, simply disappearing from form to vapor, to essence, to space, becoming not there. So you are even lighter now. Is your worth diminished? Are you less of a self? Now your arms dissolve. Like mist at dawn, slowly but steadily becoming transparent until there are no arms. No arms and no legs. Floating. Are you lesser now than you were? Now the torso is dissolving, the gut, the spine, the lungs, the heart, all vanishing. The function of the vital organs isn't necessary, you see, because there is no body to support. You're lighter than air. You're woven in and out and through the air. You are the fabric of the cosmos. Have you diminished from when you were in that heavy, dense body? Or are you greater? No longer confined to the density of matter, but joining the primordial dimension of unformed essence and space. Pure potential. The muscle and face on the head. The skull is gone, it is not dense. That clever brain isn't needed, all the data exists anyway. The self that you have always been is self and is infinite. And just as the body that you are wearing now is not the same as it was when you were born, for it is regenerated infinite times, the self inside has never changed. Infinitely whole. So stay here suspended in the knowing of the existence of yourself. Worthy, loved, just as meaningful, just as real, not of the thoughts, but sovereign over them. The one who observes, the one who knows. Poised, like an infinite tone in a never-ending harmony. Strand of God, known and valid forever. And now gently descend back into the body. Let all those atoms take form again. That is how quickly God can manifest something. That is how quickly your perfect consciousness, your perfect knowing of Trinity, of source and spirit and substance can call something into being. That is how quickly and easily and gracefully you were so wonderfully made. Now, all of a sudden, you are in your body again. So wriggle your fingers and wriggle your toes and ground yourself back in with some deep breaths and know that the trans-dimensional nature of your being remains intact, and know that you are sovereign, whether you're actively controlling your life or not. You are remembered into the body of God, and you remember who you are. Thank you very much for joining today. I encourage you to write some comments in the chat. Let us know what you thought. If you're watching it later on, click or type replay into the comments so that we know that you were here. Share your ideas with others and pray ceaselessly for everybody in the world. Now I will turn off the live stream and we will take questions from the live group.